What's up? Welcome into Foxboro Rush. He's Sean McGuire. I'm George Balekji. This is on the heels of the Patriots getting their teeth kicked in 24-3 on Thursday Night Football against Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. Sean, it's late at night. We just sat through that football game. I'm going to be blunt. They got their asses handed to them. How are we doing tonight, my friend?
Yep. I'm good, George. I was just listening to a lot of the press conferences, and you're not the only person to say exactly that. There's a few captains that just came out and said, we got our asses kicked. So,
look, I didn't hear those. I saw the Jabril Peppers bite, and Jabril will call it like they see him. Jelani Tavai, same thing, asking of why did you guys come out? And he cut off the question, said, we're football players, we're professionals, we have to show up. This is on us. We're going to get into all that. 24-3 again. Aaron Rodgers looking vintage. Aaron Rodgers having his way with his Patriots defense that never had an answer. Their offense could never even get to the ground game. And Drake Maye made his debut for the Pats in an actual NFL game. We'll have all that along with our studs and duds coming up on Rush. Sean, this game ended, and I was astonished. The Patriots never got inside of the Jets 20 until that final drive by Drake Maye in garbage time. The closest they got was the Jets 26th. And just the numbers, the raw numbers of this. Aaron Rodgers completed 77% of his passes, 281 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was unstoppable and picked them apart, was one step ahead of his defense every ounce of the way. The Jets ran for 133 yards on the ground by committee. The first time the Patriots led up more than 90 rushing yards in a game this season, and time of possession dominated by the Jets because the Patriots were never on the field. Only 11 first downs to the Jets 27, and the Pats 2 for 11 on third down. New York Jets 10 for 15. Simple as that. This game was lost because the Jets came up. They were the more prepared team. They wanted to play. They were a lot more urgent, and the Patriots were flat. This is the team we thought we would see, but not the team we saw at all week 1 or week 2. I didn't think they would fall off the cliff this hard and this fast, and they did on a short week in New York.
Yeah, exactly what you just said. I think that was my biggest takeaway is it took 3 weeks, but this is the team that we expected at the start of the season. A few injuries go against them, and all of a sudden they look, incompetent. I mean, they just cannot block. There is no time. What was it, 5 sacks total? Or something like, Actually, it was 7 sacks total, something like 15 quarterback hits, I think I saw. So that was, the offense scores 3 points. What was it, like 2 yards per play, 2.9 yards per play? It was 1.8 yards per pass. I mean, these are Pop Warner numbers. Like that is a really bad offense. And then you look at on the defensive side, and 24 points, no, not the end of the world. But, they let Aaron Rodgers look like vintage Aaron Rodgers. And it was like 14 missed tackles for 100 extra yards. Mm-hmm. That's just not going to get it done. And, I think one of the things that really jumped out to me is just they really missed Juwan Bentley.
They missed him dearly. This is something we knew would happen. But to be this brutal, I did not see that coming. But we saw the difference of Juwan Bentley wearing the green dot. It's not even what he can do in the run game as a big thumper linebacker at 245 pounds. Jelani Tavai was wearing the green dot. Similar size, similar stature. Mm-hmm. But the IQ of Juwan Bentley was exposed with him not being out there, of how much they were missing him, because he's a guy that calls the plays, lines everyone up where they should be. He keeps the defense a step ahead, and that's what looked good for this defense week 1 and in the beginning of week 2 before he went down with that torn pec. No Juwan Bentley on the field brought this defense to be less prepared, and that is a lot for Kyle Duggar, for Jabril Peppers, for Jelani Tavai to take on. But this is the NFL, and that's what you have to do. DeMarcus Covington, as a first-time defensive coordinator, has to be prepared, especially on a short week. And we saw the difference of a defense without Juwan Bentley, where they were a step behind and could never even catch up, to an offense with Aaron Rodgers, where he was picking every mismatch he wanted, every single snap. Yeah. It was slants, it was quick passes, he was getting the ball out fast, where they weren't bringing in extra blockers, and the Patriots' pass rush was winning their reps. But there was no pressures. There were no quarterback hits aside for a few sacks and sometimes getting to him because the ball was getting out so fast. And when he wanted to leave the pocket, it didn't matter. He was 5 for 5 throwing on the run, 62 yards and 1 touchdown throwing on the run. They could not catch up to him. They could not grab him. And then again, the Jets as a team for running for all that yardage too. And I went through it, Sean. 7 different New York Jets caught multiple passes. This secondary, for the second straight week, outside of Christian Gonzalez, was exposed. I mean, Gonzalez did let up a touchdown to Garrett Wilson, but Sean, that was a perfect ball from Aaron Rodgers, who looked like MVP Aaron Rodgers. Otherwise, held Garrett Wilson to just 5 catches, 33 yards. Like, he did his job fly papering the best wide receiver for the Jets. But Jonathan Jones, he was picked on all night by Mike Williams, by Tyler Conklin, by anyone around him. Marcus Jones, same thing. Jalen Hawkins at safety, same thing. They were just picking on everyone but Christian Gonzalez, and it paid off. The first touchdown pass, Sean, was Alex Austin lining up with Jonathan Jones on the sideline. He went right to his guy, Alan Lazard, and he got right into the end zone. We just saw the difference. This is why I still think the Jets have a shot to win this division. They started out awful. They looked terrible against the Niners. Cleaned stuff up against the Titans. This is Aaron Rodgers' 3rd football game back since tearing his Achilles last season. 4 plays into the season. This is a Jets team that's getting better week by week. And the talent on this roster, it took a while to settle down, but they needed to get their defensive line in check. And they did without Jermaine Johnson, their second best defensive lineman. They have to get the secondary in check with Michael Carter and DJ Reed playing on one leg. But Sauce Gardner is still Sauce Gardner. And this is a team that's getting better week by week. There is just the talent discrepancy between the Seahawks and the Patriots, the Jets and the Patriots, and we've seen that the last 2 weeks, where at least week 2, they played near perfect. Today, they just came out and it wasn't even close. Only 130 yards of total offense, Sean. And offensive line-wise, from the very first play on a bootleg, an unchecked rusher off the edge, did not care for the run. They went right to Jacoby and hit him in the mouth. Then on 3rd down, they overloaded the right side with them having an extra blocker on the left side to help out Caden Wallace. And Quincy Williams unchecked up the B gap. Boom. Right into Jacoby Brissett's chin. This offensive line from the jump was not ready, and they never, ever even put up resistance. And the same thing with this defense. They never got settled in. They never made any adjustments. They were simply outcoached and outplayed all night.
Yeah, I mean, that offensive line, it was like the first 3 drives, they gave up 3 quarterback hits and 2 sacks to just unblocked rushers. Like, guys just coming off the edge, like not being touched at all. And, I don't know exactly, who that's on specifically. Is that Jacoby Brissett? Is that, David Andrews even for setting protections? Is that on, guys coming around Mike Onwenu? I'm not sure exactly where that falls, but it's that was very clear, and that was right from the jump. And I do think, to your point about like the talent discrepancy, I mean, the Jets have star players, and no doubt about it. I mean, Garrett Wilson, obviously Sauce Gardner, like the Quinton Williams, they have stars. The Patriots don't. And I think for like, this was the game where maybe more so even than last game that like just was so clear. It was so evident. And again, a few injuries here and there, right? I mean, the Patriots are on their 3rd different left tackle in 3 games. So that's a huge position. Then, Bentley, so they're on their 2nd string off-ball linebacker. That's a big thing. You get Tavai kind of out of position. I feel like he was playing better on the edge in the first 2 weeks. So again, it's just the roster is not good enough to have these sorts of injuries at key spots. And when you do have them, I mean, it's NFL football. Injuries happen, absences happen, and they're going to continue to happen, not just against not just for the Patriots, but throughout the league. And the Patriots are going to suffer more of them. And it's when that happens, and we've seen it now, that the roster is just not deep enough to overcome that.
It's the fact that, as you mentioned it, I mean, week 1 was Chuks Okorafor before he was benched for Vidarian Lowe. Week 2 was Vidarian Lowe. Week 3 was Caden Wallace. Making his first ever high-level start at left tackle. Like, he only played right tackle at Penn State. And we even saw that rear its head where it was back-to-back bad holding penalties on Caden Wallace. But it's such unnatural movements he's making out there. And the Jets were smart to have a Will McDonald hunting on his side, who's stepping in and stepping up with Jermaine Johnson out. Juwan Bentley missing for the Patriots is huge. The Jets were without C.J. Mosley, one of the smartest off-ball linebackers, one of the best linebackers in the game, a guy that Bill Belichick will sing his praises to no end and point out how good he is. They were without him. They were without Jermaine Johnson, who's a 3-down defensive end, can get it done in the run and on the pass rush, of course. But it didn't matter. Like, this offensive line was terrible. You brought it up on the 15 total quarterback hits, in 35 dropbacks for Jacoby Brissett, there were 22 pressures by the Jets defense. And a pressure is literally anytime you make the quarterback move off his spot after his drop back, or if you're touching him as the ball is going. On top of 15 quarterback hits between Jacoby Brissett and Drake Maye. It was porous. It was terrible. And this goes back to, we saw promise kind of in training camp, somewhat in the preseason, but hey, the Patriots don't have an actual left tackle. And then they're without Sidney So in this game too, was their starting left guard all camp until right before the season when he went down with an injury. So you're with Michael Jordan at left guard, and he went down with a knee injury at the end of the game. So Zachary Thomas, with 36 career snaps at the NFL level under his name, was now lining up at left guard. If that's what you roll out against Nick Bosa, if that's what you roll out against Jalen Phillips, if that's the guys you put out against Danielle Hunter and the Texans, Jacoby Brissett's not going to make it past that Texans game. He's not going to make it to London. And I don't have faith Drake Maye would make it to that point too, because that's a guy you put in. And we saw him, Sean. Let's get into it, talking about Drake Maye making his debut. Drake Maye had 12 dropbacks. He had 4 designed runs. He went 4 for 8, so he got 8 passes off, 22 yards. Scrambled twice for 12 yards. Good throw over the middle to Pop Douglas. Also sacked twice. 1 scramble. He took a licking from number 44 for the Jets. His name escapes me. He still looked off with some of his accuracy. He looked inconsistent. He looked rushed. And that's because he knew the line he was stepping behind. And also, of course, there's the jitters and the nervousness of playing in your first NFL game. We saw the flash of Drake Maye, but this offensive line, you don't want Drake Maye behind it. And we saw it because of how banged up Jacoby Brissett is.
Just to pick that up, Jermaine Sherwood is number 44. Escapes you.
Thank you.
But
I help out your math last week. You help out my roster blemishes this week.
For Drake, and it was good to see him. I mean, obviously it was garbage time, like 4 left. The fact that he took the field with 4.5 minutes left in the game and played the rest of it. I mean, good for him, right? I mean, pretty decent drive, 16-play drive or something like that. Let him down into the red zone. He took 2 sacks in 16 plays. I mean, and that, like, those are just, that's not including, a different big hit that he took, all the hurries and pressure that he faced. So, I mean, it's just that, like, small glimpse, that small 4-minute and 30-second window, never mind the previous 55 minutes before that, but that, like, to me showed, like, okay, you still need to keep Drake Maye on the bench. Like, this is one, and Jacoby Brissett hasn't done anything to lose the job, in my opinion, at least. Like, he has no chance pretty much every time he's out there. I mean, would you just say like a 60+% pressure rate that he was under? I mean, that's
22 of 35 snaps.
So it was 22 of 35. I think that's right about 62. But yeah, I mean, it was good to see Drake Maye, but it's just the offensive line is just it's so concerning. And it was today. I mean, I think it might be like rock bottom. Like when we look back on the season, I think that there's a very good chance, and maybe that's because of the injuries. Maybe you get
3 games, let alone in London when they're facing a Joshua Hines Allen and a Trayvon Walker and Eric Armstead, like at all 3 points, both on the edge and the interior, blowing up the pocket. But to get back to Drake Maye. And it was where we hear of, well, Jacoby Brissett is a professional, has played in the NFL. He knows how to get out of trouble. Even Drake Maye on his first scramble tried to go right up the middle. It was quick. 1 read. If it's not there, go and scramble. And he got lit up by your boy, Jermaine Sherwood. Like, there's still those points of you're seeing the promise, and then he gets hit. It's him getting sacked when they finally get within the red zone and get inside the Jets' 10 and just not getting the ball out when he has to have that clock. Now, the 3rd and 8 scramble he had, he gets there, and I go, Jacoby Brissett can't do that. Like, Drake Maye can scoot. He's more athletic than Joe Milton. People won't want to admit that. He's more athletic than Joe Milton. He's fast. He's good. He's athletic. This is a kid that is a good quarterback, though, and you want to develop him as a good passer. This offensive line can't help him. And you're right. Like, Jacoby Brissett didn't go out throwing picks, didn't lose a job. At times holding on to the ball too long. And that goes back to the Seattle game too, of he would have 5 seconds in the pocket going back through the Seattle game. I remember his first sack and his 3rd sack, held on to the ball too long, got to get it out. But what is Alex Van Pelt doing downfield? How deep are these breaking routes for the receivers to get open? Because again, the wide receiving production, yes, Pop Douglas, 7 catches for 69 yards. But it was Pop, Jalen Polk, and then not until garbage time did Kayshon Boutte get a catch. It was Jalen Polk and Pop Douglas combining for 9 catches for, quick math, 79, then add 3, 82 yards. That was really hard at this time of night. But, like, that's still awful. Compared to the Jets where it was where it was Tyler Conklin stepping up. And that's great quarterback play. But even with older tackles, them just completely taking Keion White out of the game plan. There was no pass rush there. Like, we just saw how bad this offensive line is all night long. From the very first play to when Jacoby got hit on a bootleg to the very last play where Drake Maye got sacked and Jerod Mayo said, let the clock run out. There was a point like, call the timeout. You put Drake Maye in, he needs practice at calling plays in the huddle. He obviously needs to adapt to the NFL speed in actual game against actual starters that actually want to take his head off, not preseason simple defenses, and put him in that true 2-minute drill. You get sacked, call a timeout. All right, kid, 7 seconds left. You're on the 7. What do you do? Make some plays. If he throws an interception, I don't care. Let him learn from those mistakes. But they wanted him to get out in one piece. The Drake Maye debut, we were hoping it'd be something with like valor, Week 9, after that London trip, at home, right? Make it a big deal. Or actually, it's on the road against Tennessee. But like leading the Pats against the Titans, lighting up that bad defense. It was him in garbage time, him getting his teeth kicked in too, just like Jacoby. And that's what this offensive line is leaving it to. And that's where it's just such a red flag. And Sean, there's no solution in sight. That's what gets me with this. There's no solution with this offensive line.
Without a doubt. I mean, we're mid-September, late September. There's nothing they're going to do about it at this point. And just to kind of push back on one thing, and I thought this like after the Seahawks game too. I mean, Jacoby's taken a few coverage sacks. Like, he does hold on to it. I do think like based on what we saw in previous years, I mean, I would so much rather a coverage sack than throwing into traffic and throwing a pick or making a Will Levis type play and, throwing it at someone's feet for a fumble. So I'm all right with taking coverage sacks and sort like those sorts of things. But yeah, it's not the sexiest debut for Drake Maye, but I think that's fine. I mean, to me, it also says like, next week, if they're getting their teeth kicked in again, maybe we'll see more of it. And so now it's like, does this almost become a trend? Does he start getting, 4.5 minutes today? Does he get 6 minutes in the fourth quarter when they're down 3 scores next week? Does he? And I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think you could see that kind of progress to the point that all of a sudden then it's getting to week 10 or week 12. And that is when he makes a start. So I do think like, those sorts of moments to kind of increase the reps, I think that's a fair way to go about it. And Jerod, even after the game today, I mean, he didn't shoot down the fact that Jacoby was going to be the starter next week. Like he's like, we'll see. We talk about it every week. It's a competition every week. You're competing for the job. So he didn't come out and say like, no, Jacoby's our starter next week. So I think that's kind of moving in the direction for Drake too. And again, I just said, I don't think that Jacoby has done anything to lose the job, but I do think like it might get to the point where it's like, all right, we're going to get Drake Maye in there.
It's also to your point too of Jerod Mayo talking after the game. He did say, quote, there was some hesitancy to put Drake Maye in late because of the offensive line. In the second half, I felt like our O-line wasn't blocking the way they were earlier in parts of the game. I don't know what earlier parts he was talking about at all, but he said the opportunity for Maye was too good to pass up. First drop back, Sean, Jacoby Brissett was hitting them out.
Yep.
Third play of the game. Second drop back, B-gap blitz, unchecked, Quincy Williams hits him. Then about the quarterback change, he goes, I don't know. We talk about it every single week. You're competing for a job. We'll get together as a coaching staff. And Jacoby was asked about that by Drake, about that quote by Jerod Mayo, and he said, I'm not going to overreact to something I didn't hear. Look, Jerod Mayo is going to pump up competition every week. It's all about competition, everyone getting better. Here's the baseline. Like he said, for a successful season, we're going to be competitive. We're going to improve game by game. Week 1, they were competitive. They won. That's success. Week 2, they were competitive. And they got better offensively. Like they showed more. They scored more points. And they played a tougher defense and, in a way, kept them in check. Cool. This was a step back. Like, this did not check any box of anything you want as you're building a team. And every NFL team will have this type of game once, twice, 3 times in a season, right? Like, it will happen to everyone. But this is the step back they get. And again, it's Drake Maye learning how to be a coach. Talking about Jacoby. Just say, yes, he's our QB1. We took him out because the game was out of hand and the offensive line wasn't blocking well. I wanted Drake to get the experience. And he'll learn as it goes on. But even to your point, if it's 4 minutes and it's 12 dropbacks tonight, at the rate that they let up pressures, what is it going to go from 12 to 15, from 12 to 20? Then he's going to get sacked, 3 or 4 times in those dropbacks? I'm talking dropbacks solely here. And then get pressured on 6 to 14 of them. Like, this isn't the environment you want a rookie quarterback, especially someone that was as raw as him coming out, to learn and develop under. He had his first pass, telegraphed it right to Austin Hooper, almost picked up, and he looked rushed. He looked jumpy in the pocket. He looked like he was happy feet. It wasn't a good base, and it wasn't good technique that he threw with. And then the last pass to Demario Douglas, even, he went short-armed it because it was a hospital ball to his receiver. Like, Demario didn't want any part of it. He wants to get out of the game healthy. There's still a lot of progress and learning Drake Maye needs to make. Good he got an NFL game. This team is not ready to support, and they haven't been. They're not ready to support a young quarterback that is still as raw and far away from being an NFL quarterback as him, Sean.
Yeah, no complaint, no objections from me. I completely agree. I think, it'd be a pretty quick reaction. It'd be reactionary to just come out and say, like, yeah, he deserves to be the starter at this point. I mean, we saw him for 16 plays, and it was fine. I mean, it's exactly what you would expect. So I think at this point, you got your doors blown off and just kind of get back to the drawing board, enjoy this little mini bye week, and try to come back better the next week. But I definitely agree. Like, it was a setback. I mean, it was 2 competitive games, week 1 and 2. This week it was not competitive. It was over midway through the second quarter when the Jets took a 2-possession lead, a 2-touchdown lead. I mean, nothing that the Patriots have shown offensively in 2 weeks, and tonight showed anything that would make you think like they could come back from that. So
It's them getting their doors blown off, and by a pass rush as vicious as the Jets and a run game as dynamic as the Jets. Next, you have Bosa, one of the best defensive ends. And next you have Jordan Mason in that 49ers zone blocking scheme that doesn't matter who the running back is, the blockers get there. Jets ran for 133 yards, averaged 4 yards per rush. Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, obviously the main of that, 54, 55 yards each. They had their way. The Patriots didn't allow more than 70 yards rushing the past 2 weeks. It doubled. It almost doubled in one game. And the same thing with the pass rushes that they will be seeing. Let's get to it. We normally do 3 up, 3 down. It's going to be hard to find 3 up. Sean, you're a better man than I. You most likely found 3. But let's start. Give me one guy that you're giving at least was good, a stud in this game for you.
I'm going to go with Demario Douglas. And a lot of this is because we talked all last week and after the game on Sunday that we wanted to see more of Demario Douglas, and we did. 7 catches, team high 69 yards. He had that first half handoff too. He drew a penalty, ended up being an offsetting penalty, but he drew a penalty. I think it was in the first half maybe. And so you saw more from him. You saw him get open. You saw him get yards after the catch. You saw, when it comes to him, you saw some positive signs and some development after getting just 3 targets in the previous 2 games. So, again, it's tough to come away with any sweeping conclusions from this offense at this point. But I would say it was a good step forward for Demario Douglas.
Averaged almost 10 yards a catch, literally 9.9. That's a Jackson Smith and Jigba. Patriots fans saw the week before carve him up. That's what Pop Douglas could be for this offense. My stud I'm going to start with, I'll go Christian Gonzalez. I said it earlier. He was one-on-one with Garrett Wilson pretty much the whole game. 9 targets came his way, only allowed 5 catches for 33 yards. Yes, it was 1 touchdown, but Garrett Wilson's one of the best route runners in the NFL. And Aaron Rodgers literally threw the perfect football. A half inch more inside, Christian Gonzalez would have batted it down at the line of scrimmage. I thought he was going for the pick 6, which I was all for on that. I was like, hey, that's the only way you're scoring tonight. No, he was stretching out with his inside arm, his right arm, try to bat it down. Just a perfect ball by Aaron Rodgers. Christian Gonzalez for 3 weeks, Jamar Chase, DK Metcalf, Garrett Wilson, none of them have gone for more than 45 yards receiving on him. And Garrett Wilson with his 5 receptions are the most that he has let up so far. And it was against the best quarterback and one of the best receivers he's faced. Who else do you have for a stud from tonight's game, Sean?
Yeah, I also had Christian Gonzalez, but my last one, I'm going to go with the punter, Bryce Behringer.
Oh, you stole it from me. I was going to go Behringer too.
All right. So, and a punter? Yeah, a punter. I mean, the guy, he had some boots. It was 5 kicks, 245 yards. He pinned the Jets inside the 23 times. He had a 57-yard kick. So, again, like when we're talking, that's when it's, we're really scratching here, scratching the surface here. But it was a good game for him, and he's had a good start to the season. So good for him.
Behringer's been nails since last season. We were joking about it watching the game. Our coordinated producer, JJ's like, the punter's doing good. I'm like, yeah. And then we're like, yeah, actually flipped the field 4 times, pinned him inside there 23 times. Like he's helped them out as best as he can. I only had 2 studs, and so I'm stopping there. I'm not giving anyone else. I'm not going to be charity. Let's go to duds. Who do you have for your duds from today's game?
So I have a few different groups of duds, I guess I would say. The first one that I'm going to go with is the Jawan Bentley replacements. Mm-hmm. And so I classify that as Jelani Tavai and Raekwon McMillan. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but they really underwhelmed. I mean, they were kind of thrown into a big spot and they just came up short. I mean, a handful of missed tackles between the two of them. I know we mentioned this earlier, but 14 missed tackles among the defense itself. Tavai also he was targeted quite a bit in coverage. He gave up a really nice pass from Aaron Rodgers to Tyler Conklin. It was a 22-yard gain on that long scoring drive. He had that brutal unnecessary roughness call on, I believe it was Breece Hall, during another scoring drive. And then in terms of McMillan, I mean, kind of the same thing, just a handful of missed tackles. He had at least one, I feel like it was more than that, but at least one play where he was, 3 or 4 yards in the backfield. And I think it was definitely on one of the running backs. And he just failed to make the play. And so, those plays kind of really added up. And so just a disappointing from them. And I also, are there any long-term thoughts, takeaways when it comes to those two? I think it's fair to think that.
It's going to be baptism by the fire at that position, how significant it is. I'll see if Raekwon McMillan can be healthy. I'm with you. You said it earlier. Like Jelani Tavai is best when he's being a Swiss Army knife in the box, lining up on the edge and rushing the passer. My first dud is the entire defense. Like they were carved up all night, 13 missed tackles, 100 yards lost. The Jets finished with 400 yards of offense. You gave them 100. If you literally placed them at their own half-yard line, you gave them a touchdown. So defense is a dud. That's an easy one. I'll go back-to-back duds. Offensive line, 22 pressures on 35 dropbacks, 15 quarterback hits, 5 sacks. You were leaving Jacoby out to dry all night long. Same thing with Drake Maye. Defense, offensive line, 2 key pieces for this team to be successful were both duds tonight, Sean. Who's another dud you have?
I'll just follow up with that. I just had the Patriots' lack of passing attack. I mean, so that kind of includes the whole offensive line and includes the receivers. Again, just 1.8 yards per pass. I mean, that's tough. And moving on from there, I'm going to go with a specific offensive lineman, and I went Caden Wallace. And I don't think it's like unfair to pinpoint him. No. The offensive line in general was really bad, but he had those 2 holding penalties. He had a illegal motion penalty, illegal
formation twice.
It was illegal formation, yeah. He had that penalty, and I believe he had one last week too. Yep. So back-to-back weeks with those. Just kind of a tough spot. The third offensive tackle in as many weeks, third left tackle in as many weeks starting for the Patriots. But just, a pretty rough go for it for the rookie.
Yeah, don't forget we were sold by Elliott Wolf that, no, he could play left tackle. He looked lost at left tackle. Yeah. My third dud, Alex Van Pelt and his play calling. 7 of the first 9 plays were pass plays, Sean. I don't know if he's trying to make a point. He's trying to show off. I could get the receivers the ball. You're all about the run game. Ramondre Stevenson finished with 6 carries, 23 yards. You never could get the run game going because by the time you got the ball back after your back-to-back punts because you kept throwing the ball, it was 14-0. Like you took yourself out of the game. You never allowed the offense to play with its strength. What's another dud you have from today's game?
So I'm going to go with Alex Austin. And we see him, he elevates up the depth chart. Marco Wilson, healthy scratch. As soon as Alex Austin stepped on the field, Aaron Rodgers went right at him. You mentioned it earlier on the Allen Lazard touchdown. Again, just another brutal missed tackle. One-on-one, open field, just completely whiffed on it. That gives the Jets their first touchdown of the game. And it just the story was told throughout the entire game. So, for Alex Austin to kind of enter the fold for the Patriots, in week 3 after not playing a defensive snap each of the first 2 weeks, and have that as one of his first snaps, just not great.
Yeah, but I'm actually going 4 duds because I only went 2 studs. Ramondre Stevenson fumbled 3 straight weeks. First one lost, never got the ground game going. Ball security is job security. Ramondre has to get that going. All right, Sean, that wraps up this episode of Foxboro Rush, man. Appreciate you staying up late with me. We'll see what it looks like next week. Patriots head out to San Francisco, taking on the 49ers. Bosa, Jordan Mason, Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, another elite team coming their way. We'll see if they do any better. And you guys know it. Catch new episodes of Foxboro Rush every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This is, of course, a Friday edition. We'll see you guys Monday morning. For now, we'll leave you with this. Caught up with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi, of course, very close with Bill Belichick. Great convo with him talking Patriots and everything across the NFL. Check it out right here. He's Michael Lombardi, host of the GM Shuffle podcast, host of Coach with future Hall of Famer Bill Belichick, and you could catch him every morning on VSiN on the VSiN Morning Show. Michael, thanks for taking the time. How are we doing today?
We're good. Thank you, George. Appreciate you having me.
Of course, anytime. Excited to talk football with you. I want to talk Patriots, and let's start there. And looking more big picture, so far from pre-draft through free agency to now where the team is at, how do you assess how Elliott Wolf has done as a de facto general manager and the head of the front office for the Pats?
Well, I mean, look, they signed a lot of guys that Elliott was a part of before in prior regimes. I think one of their best players, Christian Gonzalez, was there last year when Elliott was part of the personnel department. So I think the mix of old and new has worked out really well, specifically when you look at their team. I mean, the offensive line is struggling right now because of injuries and because of a lack of depth. But for the most part, the strength of the team is in the defense. And if you go through the defense, whether it's Kenyon White, who was drafted in the second round last year, Gonzalez in the first, some of the guys, Dietrich Wise goes back a long way. Unfortunately, Barmore got hurt. But I think, to me, a lot of those decisions were part of the past regimes, which Elliott was a tremendous part of and instrumental in helping. So I think really well. I think, to me, the team has strength. I think they've done a good job of knowing what their strengths are, which is they're going to have to play a certain way, run the football, play great defense, and try to keep the game close to the fourth quarter.
Yeah, one of the highest rushing rates in the NFL belongs to the Patriots. Drake Maye said he wanted to run the ball. They're doing that. And you mentioned it too. Even with the lack of depth in the offensive line due to injuries, jumbo tight end, they'll go out there, and no one stopped Ramondre Stevenson yet. Now to ask you to put the GM hat back on from your days around the league. The Chuks Okorafor situation was signed by Wolf, brought in as a swing tackle, didn't work out after 12 snaps at left tackle, and now he's away from the team. His future still uncertain. That's reflective of Chuks. Sounds like he's bailing on the team early on, but also, is it reflective of Drake Maye at all when you assess that whole situation?
Well, no, I think it's more reflective on the player. I mean, part of the National Football League is it breeds competition. I mean, the one thing you're not guaranteed in the NFL is you're not guaranteed. There's no promises made. You could look at poor Bryce Young, his first pick overall in the draft. The team gives up a ransom to get him. And after 2 games, his second season in the league, he's benched. So the one thing we know about the NFL, there are no guarantees. You just have to fight and go through adversity and overcome them. And obviously, he didn't want to do that. So this is on him, not on anybody else.
Yeah, I think it's a great point there. And we'll see how the offensive line holds up with him gone and Vidarian Lowe banged up. Through 2 games, we've seen the Patriots go one-on-one. As of the time of me talking to you on this podcast, Thursday Night Football has not kicked off yet. But when we look at how that offensive line has played, and how this offense has performed. And everyone's making the big deal of Drake Maye with his skill set can go out there and get a higher ceiling for this unit. And everyone's making a big deal of the protection for Drake Maye too. How do you approach this? Do you think the offensive line has to be in line and has to be consistent for Drake Maye? Or are you thinking, I think Drake Maye can go out there and play because of his athleticism along with how good of an arm he has?
Well, I just look at the rookie quarterbacks in the league. Bro Nix has thrown 4 interceptions, no touchdown. How about Caleb Williams? I think if the Patriots had the first pick in the draft, they would have picked Caleb Williams over Drake Maye. So let's just start at that point. I mean, the Bears can't run the football. They average 2.97 yards per attempt. They're down 33-13 at halftime. Williams has the lowest quarterback rating against pressure since 2016 with 20 dropbacks. He can't handle. He's 3-12 versus the blitz for 15 yards, and he's been sacked 5 times. And this is the best player in the draft. So, this nonsense about, we'll put Drake Maye and everything's going to be even better. Look, the Patriots are going to struggle to throw the ball, whether Drake Maye's playing quarterback, whether Jacoby Brissett's playing quarterback, or whether they brought Peyton Manning back or Tom Brady back to play quarterback. They're struggling. They scored 1 touchdown last year to a wide receiver. That was Juju Smith-Schuster. They can't really throw the ball outside the numbers so far this year because their skill level and talent level there isn't what it needs to be. So, they should be happy. Patriot fans should be happy. They were in a game. They got a chance to win tonight if they can run the football. If they get behind, the game's over, right? They can't play catch up because they can't pass protect and they don't have a good enough passing game. And what happens is when you play outside of your comfort zone, and comfort zone meaning the style of play you have to play, I think ultimately that shows your deficiencies. And we haven't really seen the Patriots' deficiencies. We have. At the end of the half last week, when they tried to throw the ball and they threw 2 incomplete passes and give Seattle that field goal at the end of the game, at the end of the half, that they played outside their norm, and it cost them the game essentially.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they opened up that possession, a run with Jermichael Hasty, who's not even a top 2 back. And you mentioned the 2 incompletions. Seattle with time on the clock, drove down, and obviously that field goal was crucial. Sticking on that point, I love that you bring up, I don't care if it's Tom Brady, I don't care if it's Peyton Manning. When you are building a roster around a rookie quarterback or someone that you need that they need to develop, how important is the offensive line? It's very important, but is that number 1? Is it number 2 behind receivers? How do you build out that roster to help out a developing quarterback to flourish?
Well, look, offensive lines are like pitching in baseball. If you don't have good pitching, you're not winning. If you don't have a good offensive line, you can't win. Look, as good as the Rams have been, they got all their offensive linemen hurt. They got blown out in Arizona. You need an offensive line. That's why all this notion you have to draft receivers early. I mean, the Saints with Rashid Shaheed, he's leading the league in touchdowns and catches. He was a free agent out of Weber State. It's hard to find a free agent out of Weber State to start left tackle for you. You got to have great offensive linemen. Detroit's reason they're such a good team is Penei Sewell is one of the best offensive linemen, probably going to go in the Hall of Fame at right tackle. And they have really good. Frank Ragnon's a really good player, so they're really good in the offensive line. They can control the game. You can't get control of a game if you can't block, and football is not that complicated. And so all these teams that want to play Madden, like the Bears spent, they draft Rome Odunze after signing DJ Moore and trading for Keenan Allen. They can't block anybody. They're going to get their quarterback killed, right? You look at that. Their quarterback can't stay healthy. And then you look at some of these other teams in the league that can't protect and are wondering why. And I think a lot of it is because they don't put a priority on it. It's not sexy to draft an offensive lineman. Although Jim Harbaugh, what he made the point when he took the Charger job, if you don't have a good line, it breaks everything down.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at how the Chargers built that offensive line. Rashawn Slater at Northwestern, Joel out of Notre Dame. And to your point, when they took Rome Odunze, Troy Fautanu was on the board, and he's been fantastic for the Steelers. And even they can go with other offensive linemen later on in that round. I love that you point out the success of the offensive line. Let's get back to how we've seen from the Patriots. They stunned the Bengals in week 1, played disciplined football, ran the heck out of the ball. Then in week 2, we see them make those small errors that were so costly. The blocked field goal they allowed off the left wing, the sack also in bad times by Jacoby Brissett. But when you see this Patriots game, through the 2 games we've watched, again, Thursday Night Football hasn't kicked off yet, is this team, how do they differ in coaching from when Bill Belichick was here to now with Gerard Mayo leading the helm?
I think it's too small of a sample size. I mean, Belichick won 6 Super Bowls, so I think it's really kind of unfair to Mayo to compare. I think, to me, Gerard's going to learn on the job. I think that's just naturally. He's never really coordinated defense before. This is his first time being in front of it. He's got to learn about his team. So, I mean, last year, the thing that was really disheartening about the Patriot games last year was the turnovers by the offense, which was horrible. They never played within their own element. They couldn't run the football. The offensive line didn't play better, and the fact they couldn't make a kick. I mean, Chad Runland, they couldn't make a kick, and this year, I think that's the other issue. They've got to get better in the kicking game, but their margin for error, George, is so small. They're not talented enough to just go out there and think they're going to play and beat somebody. They have to play a certain way, and they have to do it and execute with precise execution. They can't make mistakes. If they falter in any way possible and they get behind, if they're behind 10-0 tonight in the first quarter, they're going to have a hard time playing catch up. They're going to have to be disciplined and stay with the run game, because if they make this a 40-pass game, they will lose by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, certainly. We see how they've won or were in the games the first 2 weeks. A lot of Ramondre Stevenson against the Bengals, and him and Antonio Gibson both combined going over 120 yards total on the ground. It's their bread and butter. It is what will be their success. Michael, looking at the NFL as a whole now, we know now that Tua Tagovailoa is on the IR. We'll see when he will be back, and it is a complete mystery. But in that Tua situation, with the concussions that he has sustained over the last 24 months, what are those conversations like for our front office, both in the short term, of course, to still win games, but also in the long term to address what to do with Tua Tagovailoa?
Well, you better get another quarterback. I mean, because nobody can predict the next concussion. I don't have a crystal ball. And I just know that if you're Chris Greer, you know that one more, and we said one more last year. He didn't get one more last year. He got through all 17 games without one. But this year, after 2 games, he has to. And Miami's another team that put no resources in their offensive line. They're counting on Terran Armstead, who's always hurt, to be their starting left tackle. That's not a good problem to have. So I think, to me, if you're in Miami, you have to say to yourself, look, if Tua plays 10 more years, great. But there's a chance he might not. One of the jobs of a general manager is to always think about what's the worst that could happen. What's the worst that could happen? And I know that's a negative world to live in, but that's part of the job. And I think, to me, that's what he has to do. And I think they've got to find themselves a young quarterback. Maybe they think of Skylar Thompson. I perhaps don't, but I haven't seen enough of him. They have to think of him that way and see if he can play that way. They need another. They're going to need somebody at some point. If Skylar Thompson's not good enough, they're going to need to draft one.
Yeah, for sure, for certain. And we've seen even Skylar Thompson go out there and the offense just get derailed. But at that point of the game, it was also a blowout against the Bills. When you look at the Tua situation too, Michael, we see all the responses come out of he's likely assessing how much he could get out of his bonus, what guaranteed money he can walk away with. Do you think that's what he and his team are doing, or do you think he's more assessing of, do I even want to play football anymore?
I can't, it's hard for me to figure out the mindset of a player. I mean, look, the way, I think instinctively, the way he took on the tackler, I mean, he absorbed the brunt of the hit. He gave the hit to, the
DeMar
player.
Hamlin.
I mean, DeMar Hamlin. So that was really, instinctively you had said slide, but, he's playing football. I don't know how to think for him. I can't answer that question. I do know that it's, longevity is important. And if you have children, you really want to make sure you can see them grow up, and you want to be able to have a relationship with them. And I do think concussion protocol is important. So I'm happy they put him on injury reserve. So he has 4 weeks to think about it, whether he was cleared to play or not. I think sometimes look, Denzel Ward in Cleveland, he's had 5 concussions. He's still out there playing. He didn't miss any time. I think that becomes, if we have concussion protocol, we better be careful.
That's a great point you make. I even think back to the first Thursday Night Football, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, the way they were pushing the pile, the way Lamar was running, it was competitive football. You love to see that. It was the same thing with Tua in that situation, especially on 4th down. Talking again about young quarterbacks, Bryce Young benched after just 2 games with the Panthers. I mean, what David Tepper's done with Carolina has been terrible, but is Bryce Young salvageable at all, whether it's in Carolina or just down the road with another NFL team?
I think the question you should ask, are the Panthers salvageable? Like, who's making decisions in that building that knows what they're doing? I mean, look, let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
When you look at the Carolina Panthers, they converted 2 third downs all year.
Mm-hmm.
They've given up 50 points in the first quarter. The first half, they scored 3. They've been behind 50-3 at halftime. Take a guess how many third downs Patrick Mahomes has converted so far after 2 games.
I'll go 22.
He's converted 5.
5
okay. Third downs in 2 games. Okay, that's 2.5 per game. So he's not much better than Bryce Young, but yet, obviously he plays better than Bryce Young. So it takes some time. They spent all off season trying to get an offensive line together to make him a better player, and yet they've abandoned it after 2 games. And this is after they don't play him in the preseason. Look, if he was bad in the preseason and he was bad in practice, I get being impatient. We never saw him. They said, oh, everything's fine. I mean, Dave Canales came out and said everything's great. Everything's wonderful. After he throws 8 passes in the last preseason game, in a game that basically everybody on that field is going to get cut. Everybody on that field is getting cut. I mean, that's the game where you play all the guys that are going on practice or going to go on the waiver wire. So what did we learn from that game? I just think it's a lot of bad organizational decisions in Carolina, and it starts with the owner. I mean, look, they hired Dan Morgan to be the general manager. Dan Morgan was part of every decision that was made leading up to Bryce Young. He was Scott Federer. He was the assistant GM. How are you the assistant and then become the head guy and say, well, I didn't approve of anything that we did in the past? I mean, that seems somewhat strange to me.
Yeah, looking at since David Tepper bought the team, Michael, they're 31-70. He's gone through 4 head coaches. There's been 2 interims. And as you mentioned it too, they invested in the guards who have been terrific. But by the time they got Bryce Young everything he needed, he looks like he's lost his confidence. And that defense on top of it has just been terrible for the Panthers. And that's why it goes back to that situation conversation. And that's where it is. I agree with you. I don't know if Andy Dalton can do any better because that situation in Carolina is just so bad.
Yeah, no question. And I think to me, look, Andy Dalton will be a little bit better because he's got more experience, but that doesn't mean for the long term he's going to be better, and he's going to make the same mistakes that Bryce Young makes. I mean, look, it's a team that's not built conducively. They take a running back. They trade up in the second round to take a running back. They paid Miles Sanders all this money, and they have Chuba Hubbard on the roster. Like, don't you think they could have used another asset for another position other than running back? To me, that they're playing it's what I call playing Madden. They're just playing Madden. They're in their basement playing Madden, trying to collect skill, when the reality is their defensive front wasn't good enough, and they've gotten worse every single year that Tepper's been there.
Yeah, agree. And even you mentioned they bring a running back. That was a injured Jonathan Brooks that they drafted to bring in.
Yep,
doesn't make sense, especially at that spot. He's Michael Lombardi, host of the GM Shuffle. You can catch him on Coach with Bill Belichick and, of course, VSiN Morning Show as well every morning. Michael, I appreciate you taking the time. Always great talking football with you, sir.
Thank you, George.